Hello everybody, making this video. Christian's going to be joining me in a minute. He's gone off to make a cup of tea. It's his fault we're making this video. I kind of made one the other day, a bit about Armour, and I'm making another one because I'm going to get Christian's point of view in a minute, so I'm not going to say that much, but I just wanted to read it because what it is in the videos he was showing me, or the links to the videos and so forth, they're talking about worms in there. I don't see anything good about these armours because they can't breathe. They have to turn their head right round. You know, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you'd be able to do quickly. I just don't think that they're very... Anyway, but in the stories about these things with the armour is a worm. So I'm going to read it to you, okay? There's the legend of this worm. They make... it's folklore. And it's been adapted into pantomimes and songs, okay? And that's the name of the worm, Lambton worm. And then it says, ooh, the legend, the story revolves around John Lambton and the heir to the Lambton estate, and his giant battle with a giant worm, or dragon. It's got dragon, see? Giant worm or dragon. And this thing looks more like a dragon than a worm. But it's not a dragon, is it? It's a griffin. Anyway, they never get things right. As with most myth stories of the change, each telling, and then it's a bit like there's different ways of explaining this, because it could be he's 3 inches long. You can read this. I'll just do my summary of what they've said. It could be 3 inches long or 3 feet long. Are you there, Christian? Christian? Yeah. Christian, I didn't read this bit. When it got to this bit about the battle with the giant worm, it's got brackets, dragon.
That's the allegory part of it, isn't it?
Oh yeah, anyway, what it is I've got to ring you back on my other phone because I can't hear you. So can I call you back on my phone?
Yeah, go on then.
Okay, so I've got Christian here and I'll introduce him when he comes back. Right, cut me off then, Christian, and I'll call you straight back.
Okay, bye.
You're coming back. Right, because this is my iPad. It's okay for listening to films, but it's not very loud. So we're going to Christian now. Oops. It's ringing. We're gonna... Oh, go off. There you go. Let's get my speaker. Answer the phone, Christian. There he is. Hello, Christian.
Hello, I'm back.
You are. You took ages to answer the phone then, Christian.
Well, no, I'm on a computer, so it's a bit slow.
Ah, I see. Anyway, thanks for... I've already done a video about this, and I'm saying it's... you've made me think how ludicrous it looks. That's what my video was. Like, you can hardly see, you can't breathe out of the thing, you can't turn around, you have to turn your whole body around because your neck won't go round. It just seems ridiculous kind of equipment to be wearing if you're fighting in it, and that's, I suppose, you were jousting on a horse.
Well, yeah, the head was static, wasn't it? It was more or less like it was sealed on. So you'd have to move your whole body left and right to be able to look. But, I mean, in a lot of cases, you couldn't really see out the headgear anyway. So it's very strange that unless the person inside could see through the metal.
Well, there's a few things here, and then we'll sort of move on, because obviously I'm stuck on a picture here. But... the one thing is that they're talking about folklores, but we often find now, as we've woken up, that the folklores are the truth. The worm isn't a worm, it's a dragon, which was probably a griffin, because the griffins run everything, not the dragons, and they turned it into the dragons. And then, obviously, there's a bit explaining the original bit of the worm, but what's your thoughts about Armour then? Explain it then, Christian. Good or bad? Were they good or bad?
I think it was something else that whoever was inside of them, because a lot of them, I mean, unless they were made for dwarfs, that's the only way you can explain it, because the actual weight, you had to be a lot lighter than the average man, even for the average man today at 5 foot.
Oh, but we were shorter then. I already said that to you. I was looking stuff up. So in the 1800s, or just before that, they said that Indians were actually about 7 feet tall, native Indians. But we were only about 5'5" then. We were getting taller.
But either way, the weight inside these armour, you had to be around about £100 or a lot less, and most of us are still about 140, 130 to £140. You know, so it don't make any sense unless whatever they were putting inside this armour was something else. That's the only way you can explain it. I mean, in that video we watched, the documentary says that no one was allowed to get near one of these knights, and whenever they came out of their castles, they're always wearing their knights. The only time you ever saw them was wearing their knights. The saying has it that if you got near to touch one, you died instantly. So were they really?
What do you call their armour, by the way? I just want to get a picture of it up. I got it up easily before, but now it wants to just bring me up army stuff. Oh, there you go. What's that? Vintage. Armour. I'll just put vintage. That should do it. Vintage. I can't think what it's called. I just call it armour. Oh, there we go. Ta-da! It worked anyway, that word. Yeah, I look at this and I never really... It's not that I didn't really bother, but I just accepted what they said. You just don't think.
You see, but this thing with the knights and armour, it goes back to previous times as well. When you look at the older Roman illustrations, they show the padding or the shielding that the Romans wear, which is only partial armour. It's like shoulder armour, but it still shows you the same worm being placed in the same place. And you think, is the man the worm? You know, there's got to be something else to it than what we first...
I mean, I was thinking, oh yeah, that's the kind of armour they need for a dragon. But if a dragon, say it was a dragon was real and they blew fire at you, they would make that so hot they'd burn in them.
They would cook straight away, wouldn't they? They
would
cook.
I mean, you can see that. I told you the only thing I could see is that they'd be wearing this for jousting, and I suppose this would protect your body from, you know, it'd be harder to. Well, you'd hear the thump, and it would probably hurt you and bruise you and that, but you're not likely to get, you know.
But when you look at some of the helmets, that the forefronts of them, it's like they've got a massive nose on them. I mean, a really massive nose, and most of the time it was the actual eye line was right in the middle of the mask. Right, well, our eyes are higher up in the human skull. So how were these people actually able to see out? You know?
Yeah, I've got one here. Medieval armour. It's got the most weirdest shape head. We're just going to the picture of it. Yeah, it's got the weirdest shape head, and then it's got like a beak sticking out of it, and you could just about see out of the two little slits either side. I think he could breathe through that bit as well because it's got holes in it. But I can't believe how many of the headsets don't have... I like this. What about this one here? Let's have a look at this one. Let's go to this one. Look at that. They look like torture machines to me.
Well, I mean, when it comes to the worm, there's a few illustrations that I came across where the worm's face looks like a dog's face. And then you think about the shape of the helmet. Were these the dog people that grew within the knight armour? You know, it's hard to conceive, but the only sort of like illustrations you do see is always the worm within the knight's armour.
Yeah, what do you reckon that's about? Do you think that's trying to show something else?
It might be an allegory, but I'm not too sure. You know, it's like the dragon and St. George. Yeah, the dragon was the Griffin, and St. George was, if you like, the UK fighting off another empire. It's two flags sort of thing fighting each other. You know, it's allegory. When we know they were empires. But
I mean, this one's open. This one's got like a grill over it. You know, like you have over a fireplace, the grill thing going round the face. There's just a line down the middle and the grill thing going across. But most of them, I just don't see how you could breathe in them.
Yeah, that comes to mind first. There's so many things you can fault with it that not designed for human use. You know, that was my main instant thought is this is definitely not designed for human use. You know, especially when it comes to the point of seeing out of them. So, mind you, dog's eyes or dog's head's eyes would be lower, wouldn't it? And the shape of them So is it related to the dog people of the time? Were they dog people? You know, because a lot of the helmets are like the shape of a dog's head. You know, that's the only connection I can make with that.
Let's go back to the Armour, because it's got loads of motorcycle helmets in that one. Even though I put vintage, we'll go back to. I just a bit shocked. I just, you know, can you imagine it? You'd hear them coming, wouldn't you? Imagine if I was running, you'd hear chink, 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 chink as I was running. I mean, it's not a very. What I mean is, if it was supposed to be, you're supposed to be, I'm out here, I'm going to kill everybody. Chink, chink, here comes the enemy.
I think there had to be something to this armour, whether it's electromagnetic plating of some sort.
Do you think they went in the water in these things? No, because it's got eye things, hasn't it? So that's.
No, they did put water in them. But
yeah, you said in that video. I don't really get that, because how does the water come out?
Unless it was sealed all the way to the top.
That's what I mean. That's like they could drown them in there.
Well, if it's not a human inside, right? If it is an actual worm being, if you like. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but why when you go back through even earlier times, and you see early illustrations from earlier centuries, that you come across the padding arm of a Roman, and it's got the same sort of worm, and it is the same worm as when you go back a century later to 2 centuries later. You know, it's the same worm, and it's always pointing the same direction. That's what got me.
Yeah, you know, I'll put worm on. I'll put vintage, and I'll put. Hang on a sec. I'm going to put worm in. Worm. See what it brings me up. Oh, it didn't like that one. It's brought me up. It's brought me up Roman stuff now.
Which is supposed to be a much earlier time. You know, you're going back 2,000 years, apparently.
It's brought me up the Game of Thrones. It's just, I put Armour vintage worm, and it's brought me up like Roman stuff. Still not really showing me the worm. It's showing me worm things. I wanted to find worm in Armour. I'm gonna vintage Armour vintage worm. Well, we just did that, and it brought me up a poem, which was quite sweet. But there's one there. The legend of the. There it is. We'll go to that one now. It's the legend again of the what's the name worm. So let's have a look. Okay, let's go down here. The Lair of the White Worm versus the Legend of the Lambton Worm. Oh, it's to do with vampires.
It's good. What, say again?
Well, there's a picture of a vampire.
Oh.
The Lair of the White Worm versus the Legend of the Lambton Worm.
Here we go again, the connection between castles, no plumbing, palaces, no plumbing. Wow.
The Lair Worm.
And I remember coming across a story about White Worm when I was a kid. I mean, a young kid, 5, 6 years old. That's incredible.
It says, I watched the 1988 British horror film called The Lair of the White Worm, directed by the infamous Ken Russell. Also wrote its screenplay, and what a surreal, hilarious romp it was. Loosely inspired by Dracula creator Bram Stoker's final, same-titled novel, first published in 1911. It also drew even more heavily than that latter novel did upon the famous Northern England legend of the Lambton Worm, a huge, blimpless serpent dragon laying waste on the countryside until it was inevitably slain by Lord Lambton. Indeed, in the movie version, Caswell, the surname of the local aristocrat in Stoker's novel, had been changed to Lambton, sound-alike surname de Ampton. Set in a rural Derbyshire, England, it stars young Hugh Grant and Lord James de Ampton, whose ancestor reputedly slew a huge serpent dragon known in this area as Ampton's worm, and also I've got lost, and also young Peter, whatever that is, as visiting Scottish archaeology student Angus Flint, who unearths a giant snake-like skull during some local excavations. So that's about myth, though, isn't it? It's not about reality, really. It's about people writing films and things. But they've got them down as Draculas. That would make sense, though, wouldn't it? Because they couldn't go out in the daytime, but they'd be all right in the suit because the sun wouldn't be able to touch their body, and that's why the helmets.
Exactly.
Oh no, it's getting worse. No, Christian, don't tell. No.
What's a worm? A worm's a parasite, and I remember the Stargate series where
they're coming with their armour. Stick the worms in, kill them, like bombs. You mean? Drop them in.
Wow. Yeah, when you look at Stargate, the Goa'uld were a parasitic worm, or worm-like being that went inside the human body, and you became the host. So it's a very similar thing to the knight's armour. It's like putting something inside, isn't it? Whether it's allegory, I don't know, but why were these armours made that don't fit normal human beings, and why is it shown throughout the Roman
I did say
Empire
we used to be a lot smaller. The average height, they're saying, then would have been about 5'5". So we would have 5'1", 5'5". We were quite small then.
Well,
I mean, my mum's 5'1". She's quite small.
Yeah, I've got to admit, a couple of my friends have been around about 5 foot. I mean, my friend was around about 5 foot, and her mother was about 5 foot. So, and she was born around about the turn of the century, not around about 1900. So, yeah, but I think some of it is allegory and some of it is truth. This worm thing and the parasitical thing. And then you've got Prince Charles, who is absolutely joyous about being connected to the Draco bloodline. Vlad the Impaler, who impaled thousands of people on stakes. And funny enough, Henry VIII did the same very thing because of religion. I don't think so. I think he was probably of the same family, if not the same person.
It's a bit strange how the worm isn't really a worm, it's a dragon.
It's a dragon. So, is that again to do with the range of empires? You know, that the worm conquered the Roman Empire. So was the worm the dragon conquering the Roman Empire? I don't know, but these knights, the armoured knights, it just doesn't make any sense with the headgear and the worldwide around the world, and it always shows like an extended face, you know, and not a normal round head. We know there's normal armour. And yet, when you look at all the royals around the world...
But the worm isn't small, is it? If it could wrap itself around the mountain, it's not small. So you wouldn't want to put one... You wouldn't want to try and put one of these in someone's armour, would you?
No, but when you look at the royals around the world, they love their armour, don't they? They always have armour where they live. You know, they're connected to the old regime, if you like, the old monarchy, you know, and it goes back as far back as records will let you. So there is a huge connection between the armour and what's going on today with the worm. You know, because when you look at the masks and the swabs, they said they've got these little nano worms in them. So
yeah, just be careful what we're saying, Christian. Can't say too much. Just don't put that word in.
Right. Well, I mean, it's terrible that we have to actually watch what we're saying these days. You know,
oh yeah, we were talking about that, me and James, that were just controlled, but you know, they've just monetized me today. But we know what you're saying, Christian.
Yeah, and I think there's more to it than meets the eye. Right through our time and records, it's like watching the TV. We know that the reality we get off TV isn't the reality and truth. You know, it's for entertainment.
Yeah, I feel a bit of an idiot sometimes. Like, you know, when I found out about the East India Company and it was a great big corporation, I'm like, well, I never heard that before. Like, I've never heard of the worm before.
And you just wonder, don't you, what happened to the White Star Line? You know, that was a huge company as well, wasn't it? Did that just vanish off the face of the earth?
Well, when they got rid of loads of submarines and ships because of Tartaria ending, that ended for the First World War. But they're lying about why they had the war. They're probably killing all the Tartarians off.
Well, one of my friends, Cheryl, she says that around about the 1900s till 1930, that period of time, that was the reduction of the Tartarian Empire, and various things were happening. It's like she says about the explosion of technology, all of a sudden this, that and the other. But when you look back in recompense, that it goes back further. It goes back 100 years, 200 years, all this technology, and it's like it gets lost somewhere along the line and then comes back and gets lost again. It's like the electric car, 1829 electric car, when hang on a minute, nobody had electricity till a certain point in the later part.
Yeah, but they've lied about that, haven't they, Christian? That was the point of that, was that they'd lied.
You know, now we're getting back to the electric car. It's like, hang on a minute, are we on a roundabout getting on and off? Getting on and off?
Yeah, because then they've got a picture here of the dragon, a red dragon being slain by someone, when actually it might have been the other one. The worm.
Yes, like I said...
it doesn't quite sound the same, does it? A worm's coming, a dragon's coming. I don't know, a dragon sounds better.
Yeah, precisely. And we know that the dragon...
Oh yeah, what about the armour for the horses then? They made it for the horses as well.
Probably for show and probably mostly for protection of the horse. But yeah, what was the point of this jousting anyway? You know,
because I'm better than you. My ego's bigger than yours.
And it was always knights, not your average soldier that got into a knight. They were knights. But who made them knights? And where did they come from? You know, there's so many questions and very little answers. The same as you go through history. The more you research, the more questions you come up with.
Yeah, that's what I said to you when we joined, and I joined this call. I said, I was saying to Amy, oh look, another couple of bits for make the puzzle a bit bigger. You just get more jigsaw pieces puzzles, and you can't put it all together at all at the moment. It's still in pieces.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of the documentaries I watched where it's like a giant Rubik's Cube. Now, I can do the Rubik's Cube, but when you've got thousands of squares, the improbability of ever completing it are next to impossible, even though it is probably possible. But yeah, it's the same scenario. It's the more you research, the more questions you come up with. And it's like, how many lies have we been told through history? You know, I mean, even the story of Julius Caesar coming to Britain with a couple of legions, taking on nearly 2 million.
Can I just say something? Not only do we have armour for men, there's a dress in armour. The whole thing is armour, but it's a dress.
Yeah, well, the knights that we know of, right? Not the knights that we've been speaking about. The knights that we know of, where the actual men that got into these armour, you know, proper ones, the bigger ones, they wore chainmail underneath the armour.
Yeah.
And they got into the armour, right? But these other armours that we're talking about, there's no mention of chainmail. It's just about being either a person or a worm getting inside of them and then filling it up with water. To me, that spells something like electromagnetic field being created within. You know, they filled it right up with water. So that's the strange point I find. You wouldn't fill it right up with water and then get on a horse because the metal's already heavy.
You don't think they were using those to go across the moats then?
Well, that's a possibility.
And also, you know, like they're just the old armour sort of does remind me of the old diving gear. I know it's not quite the same, and it's not got the head on it, I suppose, but it just reminds me of the old diving gear. That maybe it's to get across the moats.
That's a possibility, I suppose, but you've got to think of the way.
Because they could go in water then.
Then you've got to think of the water inside the armour. It'd be
well, you just said there wasn't humans in it, so...
if there wasn't humans in it, then it's something else. I mean, when you look at the electromagnetic point of it, or using of electricity throughout history, it in various parts of the world, it was more or less like an entertainment thing, which is now being brought back by certain Scandinavian countries. It's where they're shield wielding these swords and they're firing electric bolts at each other, but they're safe because they're wearing what you call insulated chainmail. So it's an old art form. And where but these armored knights, I mean, you're talking a full body metal suit with a head that doesn't move. That doesn't make any sense. You know, not even for that sport. If it was a sport,
Not even that, they can't even really breathe out of them.
Exactly.
They've got nothing for the nose. They've got two slits where they could hardly see out.
Yeah. Which tells me is whatever they were putting inside of them was not human. It couldn't have been. Like I said, unless the human was able to see through the metal, which I very much doubt. You know, you're talking like superhuman, ain't you? But basically, the arms were too small. You know, if you had to get inside of them with chainmail as well, the person inside had to be really, really skinny. I mean, super skinny. It don't make any sense. Not for.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here.
No, I thought I'd lost you. Yeah, I don't know. All I know is that they'd be impossible for... You wouldn't want to use that as your number one, like protection thing on your people. They're not protective. They're hindrance.
Yeah, I wonder if these knights were like super soldiers.
And what happens if it's really hot? That they're going to roast in these things.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to survive the day in one. You wouldn't. Not without any opening. So it totally eradicates the point of a human being inside. Especially with some of the ones I've seen that have only got a tiny little slit.
I mean, maybe they were just for battle then, because obviously they couldn't go. Once they got that on, they couldn't go to the toilet.
No, they couldn't, could they? Because there's no openings for your orifices, if you like, or your appendages to go and relieve yourself. So yeah, there was none of that on these night armors that they had in that various way. But the other later ones, where you can see that they are bigger armors, you know, and you think these aren't built for men, but the ones we're talking about, they weren't. They couldn't have been. Not in my book. Doesn't make any sense.
So do you think they were for torturing people?
Well, that's one aspect of it, I suppose, but I wouldn't have thought so. You know, I wouldn't have thought so at all.
So what were they doing then? Because basically, hey, the worm's coming, stick the worm in.
Yeah, what's the worm? The funny thing is there's a song in it about the worm from the 1960s. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense that they put humans inside. As the lady says in the documentary, that these knights were never seen. You know, whoever was or whatever was inside was never seen. You know, they only came out when they had to come out, and they only ever fought each other. They never fought anyone else, so that's the crazy part. But what were they? In reality, what were they?
Well, I'm not really coming across many of the armours with the worm in it, although obviously I saw it in her video and I've seen it before, but they keep talking about the Lambton worm, which wasn't actually a worm and was a dragon.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've seen the film you're talking about. I've never even heard of it, to be honest. But yeah.
But it's also really strange because earlier on someone was saying something to me, like when I was talking about, it was about Mexico owning America, but it wasn't. Originally it was Spain that owned Mexico. Spain had Florida as well, so you're like, wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of history we're not being told. I mean, there was a film that came out where the Norwegians or the Norsemen and the Vikings invaded America in earlier times, early in history, even before the Spanish or the French or the British ever got over there. So there's been previous. I mean, there's Egyptians as well that came to America. They found Egyptian artifacts in America, haven't they? In the Grand Canyon. And it's not just Egyptian. There was other, like Buddhas, other religions intertwined within these caves that they found. And yeah, it's been blocked off to anyone that wants to go and visit. It's now an enclosed area. So yeah, there's a lot of history we've not been told about properly, I think. But Egypt seems to be worldwide with the pyramids. I mean, it's only been recently discovered in the last 20 years or so that China has got probably more pyramids than anywhere else because of its size. But yeah, pyramids are worldwide, so that was also an empire. And we know Tartaria was an empire because there's red brick everywhere. So it's basically, that's what, to me, the reasoning that we're seeing is like you had the Roman Empire, the Great British Empire, the Tartarian Empire, the Prussian Empire, the Ottoman Empire. It's been battles of empires all the way through our history. But yet, the same families are still in power today. When you research this, you'll find this out. Well, you've done it yourself. That when you discovered about Holland and the Anglo-Saxons coming over here, and how all their names were relatively the same names, following right through the ages, through the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century. So you find that these families are still connected today.
Yes, aren't they? And a half.
And that's one point that really shocked me when I done my own research on it. That you think, holy schmoly, how come the same families have managed to maintain power going right back to the days of Egypt? You know, is there a connection between the armour? You know, we were taught that the Romans were in connection with the Egyptians. So is that connection still a bond today, or is that the two factions that have been fighting each other right through on the ages? You know, like the story of Enlil and Enki fighting each other. It's like two factions fighting for the power over Earth. You know, and they're still at it today. Is this what's happening today between the royals and the other faction? Because it certainly seems like it.
Hmm. And we're just the piggies in the middle.
Yeah, the pawns. Yeah. I mean, when you look at World War II, World War I, how many men gave their lives up? You know.
Well, we did say, I think that's how they may have got rid of a load of the Tartarians.
Well, I think that's what World War II and World War I was all about. Mainly bombing campaigns and getting rid of the old infrastructure and architecture of what was. You know, and it's still happening today, where they're bombing Syria. Well, they have bombed Syria to bits. From what we have heard over the news, whether it's true or not, we've only got the news reports from the media, and we don't really know what's true anymore because of the amount of lies that they're coming out with today. You know, have all these cities actually been like Damascus now, arms, and have they really been bombed into submission? You know, or is it all fake? You know, we don't really know unless we got people that have come from that area. And I haven't met any Syrians in the last, since this started in 2005, I think, when they started picking on Syria, which is 16 years ago. You know. But yeah, it's all connected. I think it's all connected. The whole Shambhala is connected to what's going on today. I mean, terrorism has disappeared, and it's now on us.
Yeah, well, we are trying. Not really much we can do, is there? Except tell people.
make sense of it all, you know, and we're lifting the lid, so to speak, on some of the history that we haven't been taught. You know, it's like when I was a kid, we learned about all these wars, but we were never really taught the causes. We know that World War I started over Franz Ferdinand, and as far as my research tells me, people were still dueling. So why wasn't that sorted out via a duel between people, you know, a family member that killed Franz Ferdinand, you know? Why wasn't it sorted out that way, rather than cause a world war, you know, especially when people were still dueling with each other?
You know that hill, the hill it wrapped itself round, it's got a Roman building on it.
Wow.
So
basically, looking through our allegory, the worm, whatever the worm was, conquered the Roman Empire. I mean, we know that the Romans were, well, I didn't know this until after I left school. I was never taught that. We were only taught that Rome only went as far as Hadrian's Wall and little parts of Europe. Then we discovered that Rome was worldwide. You know, you got Romano-Greco buildings worldwide. Worldwide.
Oh, right, okay. So we were part of them. Okay, carry on.
But yeah, I mean, when you discover that your own education system is a debacle, you know, and you don't learn the true facts of why some of these things did happen, like you exclaimed about the War of the Roses, how it went on for 100 years. Why? Karen?
I'm here.
Yeah, I said, why? Why did the War of the Roses carry on for 100 years?
I don't know, but that's all really confusing because when it gets to the houses, it talks about what are the houses? Let me get the houses up. 1 second. Let me get the houses up because we need to change the picture. Hang on. We start off with the kings and queens, okay? You've got the Saxon kings, and that's the one that's got Egbert. And then it's got hang on, I'll just put in my oh, stop messaging whoever you are. Then it's got Ethelwulf. And then we're going down now. Come on, get that.
Ethelhead.
Then you've got Ethelbald. Oh, stop messaging whoever that is. Ethelbald, Ethelbert. Then it goes into Ethelred. And then it goes to Alfred the Great. And he is one of their... So that guy had 4 or 5 sons. And that's all his sons. And they, to be honest, because they're called Ethel... I was wondering whether they were the Starfort people. Anyway, we're not looking at that bit, but that was my thought. And then we go Edward, and you've got more. Got Edward, and you've got what's that? Red, Edwig, Edgar, and then we're going up here because
it's the E bit, isn't it? It's the L.
Yeah.
The L. Hasn't the Elohim? You know, when you think about all these, I mean, I heard that Holland was called Helland at one.
It's called what?
Point. Helland instead of Holland. It was named Helland.
Well, we were Angel Land. We're England now. King Henry II was a Plantagenet king. So was Richard I, and then it goes on to John, and then Henry III. And then we get, it says Monarchs of England, Edward I, Edward II, Edward III, Richard II. Now that's all the same Plantagenet. And then you get to the House of Windsor. And what they failed to tell you here is that the House of Windsor is another Plantagenet family. Just call it the House of Lancaster and it's like it's all changed, but it's not, it's the same family.
Yeah.
So you think...
What they do, they change their names. I mean, even Victoria was not British, so to speak. She came from Europe. Her family came from Europe.
Russian. And then you've got... So then it goes Henry V. So this is the House of Lancaster, which is a Plantagenet. Henry VI, Henry V. And then what I don't understand is that if you're going to take all the kings out and change the name and everything, like, why would you be calling yourself? So one of the kings before you in the Plantagenet family was, say, Henry III. Why would you be calling yourself Henry IV, Henry V? Why would you carry on the names if you've left the family and you fought to change it? Oh, but you just call yourself King Henry IV. That doesn't add up using all the same names. Anyways, Henry V, Henry VI, and then when you get to the House of York, that's another Plantagenet family. So Plantagenets, Lancaster and York were all Plantagenets. But our history doesn't explain it like that.
It's very strange, isn't it? It's
and then guess what? It goes on, right? So you've got Edward IV, Edward V, Richard III. After that comes the Tudors, which was a totally different period.
But I bet it's still under the same principles like it is today, I think. I would not be surprised.
And then I was so shocked when we looked up Charles I, who comes... Where is Charles I? I haven't got to any Charles at the moment. Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary, Elizabeth, Stuart, James. They are Charles I. There you go. English Civil War. Forget to tell us that he was the Holy Roman Emperor of Europe and the world. They've forgotten to tell us Charles I was that. He's down as an English king, but he couldn't have been because he was the Holy Roman Emperor.
Yeah.
And then do you know what comes after that? It just says the Commonwealth, and then comes Oliver Cromwell.
As early as that? Wow.
1649, the Commonwealth. Oliver Cromwell, Lord Protector.
Protector, yeah.
So basically, they've lied to us. This should be a dark-skinned person sitting here. But anyway, I just thought that was really strange. It was a bit of a shock. It's like my friend realising that obviously some of the monarchy were dark-skinned was realising, what do you mean the family's all the same? You know, I've been looking up all this stuff about the Plantagenets, the Lancasters and all that, and actually they were all the same family, all Plantagenets, and they don't explain history like that, do they?
Well, no, it's like the American presidents. They're all connected as well. Well, the large majority of them are connected through...
Yeah, and you know what? The Queen changed her name, didn't she? From her German name to the Windsors. This is what could have been happening here. They just changed their name. Well, we want a different power, so we'll just change our names. That changes everything.
Habsburg. Saxe-Coburg, Habsburg, but they were the Wettins before that. And as I followed up the bloodlines, they go back even further. And the further back you go, it does actually relate all the way back to Egypt, which I found absolutely phenomenal. You know, did they just migrate from Egypt from time to time to time?
I think the War of the Roses had something to do with it, though, because like you said, I can't believe how long that went on. It went on for such a long time, and it's not about dragons, it's about griffins.
But the one thing that it involves us pawns. Us pawns
there you go.
Used.
Henry VI, 1422, the beginning of the Battle of the Roses. And then it ends in 1483, end of the War of the Roses in King Richard III's time. So that was... let's have a look. Oh, where is it? I've lost it now. Where are you? That's Richard the Lionheart. I've lost it now. I've lost it. That's too far back. John, Monarchs of England. I think that's really strange. They're probably all foreigners. House of Lancaster. There, beginning of the War of Roses in 1422, and it ended in... Oh, not that far. It ended... Henry VIII, Henry VII. Yeah, it ended 1480. 60 odd years it was going then.
I find it quite astonishing that when you do go through all these centuries and the times, that wherever you look, there is warring going on. Coming right
yeah,
up
that's what I said on a hangout today. I just can't believe we just it doesn't matter. Even there's big wars which we know about. You know, like they're going to say First World War, Second World War, But there's always wars. Like there was opium wars. There was this war. There was the French war on this. There was whatever it was. And my real shock is that, you know, like before Mexico, they say Mexico owned California, but before that, Spain owned Mexico and Florida. So what goes on there? The Spanish owned everything.
Yeah, precisely. This is what I'm saying. It's a continuation of warring. And wherever you look, you know, like you said about the Chinese thing, the Silk Road, the Opium Wars, you know, that went on for, I think, 400 years or so, didn't it? You know,
well, supposedly, I think when I did the video, it was a bit like the Emperor of the time said, all right then, we'll sign the document, but he didn't want to.
Yeah, and I think when it comes down to...
What the hell's that about, Christian? That's all to do with drugs. Was everybody out of their mind? Hey, man, we're at peace, not war.
Well, there was opium dens in England, opium dens in America, and throughout Europe.
What do they say? Do you want a sniff of this and then you can go into war?
Well, I mean, it's still predominant today, isn't it? They call it heroin, you know. But in them days, I suppose it was treated differently, or they used it differently. Perhaps in a pipe. Everybody had pipes, you know. Remember the days of the clay pipes? Everybody had clay pipes. Were they smoking opium through the pipes, keeping everybody happy?
Mind you, I suppose once you'd had a few pipes of them, you thought, yeah, let's go and kill everybody. It would work, wouldn't it, really?
Well, yeah, because you'd be out of your mind, wouldn't you? You wouldn't even know you were doing it.
I actually think that a lot of where we've come from is that War of the Roses. And that was them fighting off the Holy Roman Empire. That's what that was.
And that's what it's all about. And what's empire is about? It's about control. Yeah, it is about control. When you look at it, from one swing to the other, it's like the pendulum swinging. But the one constant is that us little humans, we're always the ones that pay the real price. And this is what I was trying to say to you about the War of the Roses. How did they manage to keep it going for such a long time? And yet these kings and queens that were in that time frame over 50, 60, 70 years managed to get captured God knows how many times and not get killed once. You know, this is the irony. You know, we're taught that when some king is defeated, they get slaughtered. Or
I don't even understand the bit about Wolsey. What it says was Wolsey was offered to be the Holy Roman Emperor. But what it was is he was offered it, but he never got it. And he's trying to make Henry VIII say, yes, let me be Holy Roman Emperor. But basically, if he did that, then Henry VIII wouldn't be king. So why would Henry VIII give up his throne to let Wolsey become the Holy Roman Emperor? So it's like, what the hell? But that's what that's what I saw in the history. It said that Wolsey was promised, he never got it. And then, of course, Henry changed the religion anyway by divorcing, and I don't understand that because everybody was getting divorced anyway without having to change the religion or whatever was going on. So that's all crazy because you didn't need to go through all this and change so that we're Protestants to break away from the Catholics just to do something you could already do, and everybody was already getting divorced. All the Catholics were getting divorced.
I think where a lot of researchers fail, like what you just said, was there a connection between Henry and Wolsey? Were they connected by family? And a lot of researchers don't delve into this area because when you work through...
And what about the fact that Henry was a dark-skinned person who came here? You know, he was from somewhere like the bottom part of Spain or Tunisia. So he's got...
Yeah, but like I said again, it's to do with bloodlines. Yeah, you look at Obama. Obama is connected to certain other presidents as a long-distance cousin.
Yeah, he even plays his wife.
It's the bloodlines. It is the bloodlines. This is what I'm saying, and this is where other researchers fail to make.
I know. And listen to this. Someone sent me a link to a website, and basically it said that Ellen DeGeneres was related to everybody. And when you looked at it, you think, gosh, she should be a princess, at least a princess. Her royalty.
Because some of us don't really know. This is the thing about all the
She's
wars.
related to Brad Pitt. She's related to everybody. But she's related to the Queen, Camilla Parker Bowles, Diana, Kate Middleton, Meghan Markle. She's related to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, the only way you can truly find your true heritage if you do your own following, if you know your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. I mean, you can trust a computer to a certain degree, And this is what I'm saying, is whereas researchers haven't made the connection. When you look at today's society and you
Oh, here's another one as well. He was James the First of England and James the Sixth of Scotland. They got different titles. I just don't think people realise. Like, for instance, the Tsar of Russia. So he was like the King of Russia, but he also had the title of the Prince of Prussia. And I don't think people realise when they're talking about the Prince of Prussia, it's the same person as the Tsar of Russia.
Yeah, I mean, even when you look at the UK, you had certain areas where you had kings and queens, yeah, or certain monarchs.
Yeah, what about that time? What was it? Mercia. There was lower kings and upper kings. How can you be a lower king? You're either a king or you're not. And then there was all these kings, and then there was an ultimate king.
It's the dilution of the bloodlines. This is what I'm saying. It's all to do with the bloodlines of where they've migrated from, you know, and the lands they conquered. And apparently they rule. If you conquered the land, that land belongs to yours. That's how they rule. Yeah. And when you look at our queen today, I mean, she's only ever bowed down to one king and queen, and that was the king and queen of Ethiopia. Now, these are royals going back throughout the ages as well. So Ethiopia was never obviously properly conquered entirely. Otherwise, the queen would never have bowed to her. You know, it's the only person that our queen has ever bowed to. You know, and we're told that she's not our queen because she's from Europe. She's a Saxe-Coburg, Witten, whatever. You know, because we had, if you go back throughout the ages, to the time of Julius Caesar, when he came with a couple of legions, which is like about 4,000, 8,000 men, and he defeated almost 1.5 million people. How did he manage to do that? You know, you think the only way that he managed to do that is with superior weapons. So obviously they had superior weapons and armory and whatnot. But it's all to do with bloodlines. This is what I'm saying about conquering lands and empires. And we're still under an empire, although we're being told, oh no, it's the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth more or less not existent. But how come Canada, New Zealand, Australia, America is still being run in the same format of this empire? You know, it is what it is.
Nothing changes then.
I mean, like our councils was just recently been taken over, and the emblem of all the paperwork's gone. The coat of arms, and we're now being told that Serco runs our council's Serco, and it just happens to be owned by Churchill's son and William's Queen Elizabeth's grandson. So it's still the same family, just being passed down, their heritage. So nothing's really changed, only the name, and this is what's been happening through history. You know. We've still got the same people in power. You know, going back to what we were speaking about an hour ago, it's still the same bloodlines. It's quite mad, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it's all mad.
But there has to be a bigger connection of why they're being allowed to do
why
this.
There's worms in the suits, you mean? Because we didn't talk that much about that in the end.
No, I mean, the only reason I can see the worms being a form of weapon, you know, something that you only saw every so often, you know, or something.
Yeah, but the dragon's enormous, so they couldn't be putting it in the suit.
Unless they were another being of some sort. But how did they put the worm in the suit? This is what I don't get. You know, they say that if you got close to it, you died. You know?
Well, somebody slayed it in the end.
You never saw who or what was inside these armours. But going back to the fact that they looked like the facial features, they predominantly came outwards. And it makes you think that, was it the dog people? You know, was it actually like a dog person that went inside, but they were a lot smaller? I don't know. You know? It's quite a mystery. But either way, why would you fill it up with water? You know? Why would you fill it?
What's your take on the dog people then?
Well, there's so many illustrations from different periods, and you think, well, these people must have existed. You know, and some of them have got halos around them. So were they part of
Doggerland? Do you think it's to do with Doggerland?
It could possibly, but that's probably why they called it Doggerland. You know, where the dog people live.
We're the angels, really.
Well, yeah. I mean, East Anglia. It sounds like it, doesn't it?
Keep that name. We changed from being Angel Land into England.
Yeah.
Have you noticed there's Greenland? There's Greenland. There's Iceland. There's England, Ireland. I wonder what that. I mean, I know it's land, but it's a bit strange that suddenly all these places up here are something land.
Yeah, but originally the UK was called Albion.
Yeah, and then Mercia.
Yeah, which came later. Yeah, it's quite phenomenal how. I mean, when you researched about Texas, that threw me back as well. The name changing. It's like it's the same place, but the names are changed. And I suppose this is like the phoenix coming out of the ashes. You know, renewal. And all they're doing is changing the names of places like New York was New Amsterdam, you know, and you think,
and that's the Dutch. That's the Dutch again. So the Dutch were there, the Spanish were there. The Spanish had Mexico and they had Florida, and it's like before, and you're like, oh, and then Mexico had California, and it's all a bit bizarre. Spain ran America before we did.
Well, I'm not sure how much of America they did run, but it was
California and Florida for sure.
The southern part of the
Oh,
continent.
sorry, Mexico and Florida.
Yeah, and there's quite a lot of evidence of that. But yet again, we come back to the same point. It's the same family bloodlines. When you look at South Africa and the Dutch there, and the Dutch in America, it's the East India Company again, which. I think there was also a Dutch one. I'm sure there was a separate one, like a faction of it. You know, like a brother and sister company, but yet they're still stemming off the same tree, sort of thing. You know, coming from the same roots. That's what I believe. That they came from the same roots.
Yeah, it's a bit like history rerunning itself, because Queen Victoria reigned from 37 to 91, so that was
64 years.
Yeah, 64 years, and our queens run even longer.
Yeah, from 1953 to 2001, so that's...
and to be honest, I think she's the first woman there. She's the first woman to rule England.
Yeah.
Well, there is someone else, actually. They don't put her in very much, and the reason they don't put her in is in the early 1800s, is because she didn't have a very, you know, she didn't have a personality like Queen Victoria, but she was still queen. I made a video about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's another mystery. I mean, why would you stay in mourning for 40 years? You know, when Albert died, apparently she was in mourning for 40 years.
And don't forget, she found this girl, and they called her Princess, and she was from Africa, although I looked her up, and basically she came over to England, was here for a while, married someone, then went back over to Africa, and then wherever she moved to, her husband left her there because he needed to go and do all his... He was obviously trading all around the world and everything, and left her there. And then she died of some disease, and she was about 38, and you think, oh. Right.
Wow. Well, I mean...
Sorry, there he is. George V was the Tsar of Russia.
I mean, when you're talking about...
Sounds a joke, doesn't it? Here, the First World War, 1914 to 1918. George V.
Oh.
He was the First World War, but he was the Tsar of Russia. Then 1936. So he was 1910 to 1936. And then he only lasted a couple of months. And then we've got George VI, 1930. That's the Queen's dad. 1936 to 1952. The Second World War he did.
Yeah, I mean, we just talking about George V. I mean, one of the things that I never wrapped my head around was the family, the Tsar, the Romanovs, asked for help from Britain, and yet their family, their closely connected family, yet Britain never came to their aid at that point, and I'm thinking, why? You know, why was there never any aid came? I mean, we know that their mother came over and she stayed with the royals.
Well, don't forget, the Tsar of Russia and Prince Philip's mum are buried in Israel in this church, which was built in the 1800s with the Russian Orthodox Church. But they're both buried there, and you think, why would they want to get buried there?
I mean, this has got to do with Tartaria again, isn't it? The great empire that just sort of like fizzled out. Well, it didn't fizzle out. It was written out of history, basically. But we know it existed, and it probably ran onwards, bit by bit by bit, as it was fizzled out, bit by bit. This is what all these little wars about, and all these fires and whatnot.
Got to have loads of fires and wars to cover up what they've been doing.
Yeah, eradicating what the infrastructure was that came before. You know, like we found out about the electric car from the 1820s. Now we're 200 years later and we're bringing the electric car back again. So
yeah, someone wrote, it was in my message for me. They said, it's a bit small, that is. They said, that puts the Wild West out then, doesn't it?
Well, this has got me as well. From what we've learned, that
so I've just gone back to the legend of the Lamborn worm. But it's too small to read. It's an article, but it's a bit small to read. Oh, it's a bit bigger here. Well, that's better. I'll just leave that on for people to read while you're talking. It's the legend of the worm still. And I mean, like, it's supposed to be a legend, but, oh, I don't know. This is crazy, Christian.
Well, I mean, I don't want to go down that subject again, just in case we get banned for it. But the worm... It's got something to do nowadays. When you look at a worm, it just gets a little bit smaller, you know.
But it wasn't. It was called a dragon at the same time. It was a worm or a dragon, it said. Oh, wait a minute. Shall I read this? This looks different. The legend of the Lambton worm has been passed down through generations of Durham and Northumberland families. Right, it's Karen. According to the legend, the worm has a circular green knoll around which the Lambton worm is said to have coiled itself 9 times, still exists about 80 yards down the river, behind the biddock in the pub on the north bank of the River Wear. The worm well was about 26 yards from the hill. Sir Harold Jeffreys writes in 1969 to tell that the worm hill is a kame, K-A-M-E, sometimes spelt K-A-I-M, deposited in a hole in the ice while it was melting, but he also goes on to say, I don't altogether understand it, and the kames, as I've seen, aren't so smooth in outline. I don't know whether any geologist has looked at the wormhill itself. He obviously didn't believe the wormhill was a kame. I've never heard of that before. What's K-A-M-E? Perhaps more interesting, the comment of Albert L. Hind, a 20th century author of a number of local history books, The River Wear, 1979, History and Folklore of the Old Washington, 1976, and the History of the Fatfield and Harrington of 1974, where he states, when I was a boy, I was told by a very old man that the wormhill was given to the people of the parish for all time by one of the early Lambtons, on condition they did not excavate. Why? Albert L. Hind was noted local antiquarian, about whom Sir James Steele's CBE, JP, FBIM, and Albert Hind had rendered a valuable service to the community by gathering together his observations, studies, and memories of a lifetime spent in the village of Fatfield. At the time of the Bolton book, the Biddock estate was held by U.L.K.I.L. What the hell's this? Thought to be the Viking origin, who assumed the Biddock as the surname. William Hilton, who married Joan Biddock, heiress of the North Biddock, built nearby Hailton Castle between 1395 and 1410. The Hilton family and the Hilton Castle are thought also to have been of Viking origin. Does that make any difference from the wherever that place is there, the Utlen it was Uttalank I can't say it, part of Norway. So anyway, I think people can read that name then. There's just a bit more, right? Oh, there's an earth on it. Never mind, there's a globe. Near Oslo, where the Danish family established a kingdom in England, in York, in England. The Norse Vikings established a kingdom at Dublin in Ireland. Recent research has come to light that was conducted on behalf of the Conrad Hilton, founder of the Hilton Hotels worldwide chain, whose family emigrated from Norway to America in the 19th century. It states that the Vikings used an alternative winter overland route, the 60 miles between Tyne ports and Solway on both sides of the Pick Wall. Hadrian's. Oh look, they call it the Pick Wall. He's calling Hadrian's Wall the Pick Wall. Oh my God, they're saying that was to shut. Yeah, the Pick Wall. Yeah. Well, anyway, a turbulent stretch. Hiltons are dominated there since the middle of the century, so there is near certainty that they must have been acknowledged by the Danes. Probably. What's that word? Oh, I don't know what that was. F-I-E-F.
F-I-E-F.
Theft holders and custodians of the said route. This implies that they had lived previously amongst the Norsemen in Norway, intermingled. The Hilton Highleton name is thought to have...
That sounds like the old name for Fife, which is up in Scotland.
It's thought to derive from the name of the Saxon Hordic Helter, which means oar or oar handle. Evidence increasingly suggests that the Norse Vikings used the overland route from Sunderland on the east coast to Sunderland. That's when we were joined together. That's probably when Doggerland was there then.
Doggerland.
Yeah.
Yes.
To the east coast to Sunderland Point, on the west coast, i.e. up to the Wear Valley, across the Stainmore Pass, where Eric Bloodaxe, last of the Viking kings of Northumbria, was slain. Don't talk about Bloodaxe, do they? The Northumbrian Viking king. And then down the Lum Valley to sail for their kingdom to Ireland. This suggests that Bidduch was a Norse Viking settlement in the 10th century, and that the Worm Hill could be a Viking burrow, a Viking ship burial. Why else would one of the early Lambtons give Worm Hill to the village of Bidduch for all time on condition they did not excavate? That's the end of it. Oh, hang on, let's just check. It might go on. Oh, God, there's not going to be more, is there? There's just some pictures.
Believe it or not, they did excavate in the end, and they did find a Viking ship with certain artefacts. They made a film about it as well.
Oh, yeah, it's a bit strange to put the ship in the hill, isn't it? Hang on, I'll just put some more. I'll wait a second.
Well, it had to be of a great leader, I would have thought.
Really?
You know, a conqueror. You know, from an earlier period, probably 5th century, 6th century, 7th century, somewhere around about there. But the very fact that you just said about Doggerland, and it's like they came across, like they were able to come across.
Yeah. And I'm just going to go down. What else is there? Let's have a look. Oh, that's the end. That's the end of that article. So that's what you're left with, is just finding odd little articles. Fatfield War Memorial, shortened following the 1828 gale, standing on Worm Hill on the horizon. That's just a picture. Oh no, I suppose it could have been a photograph. What's that one saying? Upstream towards Worm Hill. And Worm Hill, you know, that could be doesn't really look like a pyramid, but it could be.
Very strange. But there's something to do with the worm.
Yes, it must be something completely different then. Maybe the worms are the Vikings. The secret of Worm Hill. So he's saying the secret is not to excavate. And they did later on. And they found the ship. There it is. So does that help with your worm? Because, I mean, we're really talking about... Oh, where are we? We're really talking about
different centuries as well, where this worm just seems to keep making an appearance through different ages. You know, when you talk about we're talking about the Viking period is much later than the Roman period. You know.
Let's get rid of that one then. I just saw that one. Those pictures there, Worm Hill. The Lambton worm. And but on top of this hill, which isn't depicted in all of them, because it wasn't depicted in that picture just a minute ago, there's a Roman thing on the top.
Wow.
There's a pillared building. There's no roof on it.
It's the old connection, isn't it? The Roman connection. Where it said that the...
There's another one here. I'm going to go to this one. The Harrington Heritage. It still doesn't explain enough, though, does it?
See, the Gauls were mainly a mix of all them Western Europeans. What I mean, all Europeans, the Gauls, which the Romans struggled to defeat, and eventually they became the what's it called?
They've got the worm as the dragon. I mean, how can you make such a mistake? A dragon's not a worm, and this dragon doesn't have any legs or wings.
But then again, how does a dragon start? How does a dragon start? You know, from birth.
And do you know what? They've got knights slaying him, which is just like the one that slays the dragon.
Yeah, I'm thinking perhaps they killed the rebirth. If it's allegory, perhaps they stopped the...
I know, but you started off by put worms into the... There you go, there's a now, on this one, folklore, there's a dragon sitting with it wrapped round the hill with the Roman building on top. And it's got wings on it, and it's got steam coming out.
Wow.
So basically, we've just uncovered something else, but we can't quite get there because this place has it as a dragon, but it's a worm, and a worm isn't a dragon, and like the dragon's tail would have to be enormous to wrap round the hill about 7 times. And then, really, is that a dragon or is that more like an eel? We have loads of eels round us.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the alternative things that a worm could be. A worm could be a parasite, it could be a leech, it could be various things. You know.
Well, now this one says dragons in folklore, the Lambtons. The Lambton worm, and it looks like a dragon, and it's got like a knight with a cross on it, you know, like the Knight Templar cross on it. The Lambton worm. Well, that's totally different, isn't it?
Yeah, it sounds it. It definitely does.
And there's a picture there of the Lambton worm, and now that looks more Chinese-like, but without wings. The monster Lambton worm. So there is quite a lot about it.
And isn't it funny that it's like the old prophecies as well about the dragons, the red dragon and the blue dragon. And it's still current today that you have... certain things named after, like even products, blue dragon and red dragon. And when you look
the origins of the Lambton worm, and look, I'm sorry, I think that's a pyramid because the dragons wrap round it. It gives the hill layers. That's a pyramid.
The conquest of another empire, I suppose. You know, in allegory, where the dragon has defeated the pyramid. Because it's wrapped itself round it. It's defeated.
I didn't see this before. There's another dragon on top there, on top of the hill, and it's got its feet on top of that Roman building.
Wow.
But in a sense, they look like dragons, but they remind me of eels.
Yeah. But there's definitely something to it.
There you go, look, because it left the indents on the hill where the dragon had wrapped itself round. That's a step pyramid, that's why. Because that's what happens, it has steps on it. That's what happens in Silbury Hill. So it's nothing to do with the dragon wrapping its tail round and down. It's a pyramid.
Yeah, and if it's a long worm, it could be deemed as a serpent, couldn't it?
Well, they did say that, yeah. There's another one, the Pentrel Monument and Worm Hill. It's got some kind of dragony looking thing that's wrapped itself round him, but it's not very big. It's smaller than him in that one. The Lambton worm. It's quite big there, and it looks like a Chinese dragon.
And the funny thing is that you just mentioned that a lot of the pyramids, they have what you call, what look like dragons, but they are attached to the pyramids like they are a snake or a worm. You know, a lot of the pyramids do, which is that what it's saying? That the serpent or worm was it attached later because it was the conquering of that empire?
I don't know. Do you know what it means? There are actually quite there's quite, as I've gone down the page, there's quite a lot of articles about the Lambton worm, but we've already read 2 of them. They just take you on a goose chase that you're never going to get to the end of.
Serpent Kings.
Yeah, I can't get over the dragon. This dragon, you know, when they do the Chinese New Year and they're all going through the streets with the dragons, it looks like that kind of dragon.
Yeah. I covered that much. I visualised that.
Yeah. The Lambton worm. There's quite a lot about it, but I'm just a bit like, oh God. And it's, don't forget, it's supposed to be what do you call it? A wives' tale.
I don't think it is. So you wouldn't have so many buildings incorporated with the dragon or the worm, and the worm being in Roman armour.
And do you know what else it looks like? Do you know what else it looks like? This looks like the monster of the Loch Ness.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just the same as some of the other dragons do in Southern America, Peru, you know, right across America, basically, even the Indians.
I don't think it was about a real worm or about a dragon. It was obviously about land. Look at that folklore. There's a tower on top. That is down in that's Glastonbury Tor, I think. Be afraid of the Lambton worm. Should we have a quick look at that one then? There's loads of them. I'm just going to one, yeah? Shall I have a quick look?
Well, funny you said that. That comes back to what we were talking about originally. That there was a great fear about getting too close to these knights. Like they say, if you touched one of them, you died. You know, to me that would say, like, suggest that, was it radioactive or was it like electric shock? Couldn't you touch one of these knights? You know, that's crazy.
The Revenge of the Lambton.
Wouldn't you be afraid of the Lambton worm? You know, in other words, stay away from it.
This sounds more like, oh, I don't know. This is crazy. So I'm going to look at this one quickly. I wanted to see what it says because it looked a bit interesting. Let's have a quick look at this one. We've been going for 1 hour and 20 minutes. We'll have to stop soon, Christian.
Okay, no worries.
Because we've got no answers for anything. Be afraid. Let's continue. Be afraid of the Lambton worm. We observed last week our road atlas of 77 tales is bustling with beasts enough to terrify everyone to the grave, and we shall be featuring 4 such scary stories in the first ever SAMFU, whatever that is, Halloween show in Bath on Saturday. I don't know when this was. Let's just go on. But today the folklore won't be of one of them, no matter how tempting it is to attempt outrageous Geordie accents, but there are fewer tales more frightening than the Tainmore terror, the Lambton worm. One of all the dragon-slaying yarns in our connections, there's something uniquely gross about this big, fat, white, vicious, demonic creature. It doesn't speak. There's no smug charm or exciting fire-breathing, just 9-eyed, slavering, animalistic monster, intent on nothing but churning human beings up for its tea. In our retelling, there's hopefully disdainable tang of zinc comic in the sheer rock hardness of the worm slayer and the knight John Lambton, and it would be great fun to perform someday dodgy vovals and all, whatever that is. Sunderland area where the event of the tale took place has been very thoroughly mapped out for folkloric visits. I've never heard of that word before. Folkloric visits. Anyway, for many years, and the National Trust website. So it's amazing that it's folklore, but the National Trust is in on it. Trust for Penshaw Monument, see above, where the mighty dragon was said to have coiled its slimy body even as a full map of where to visit to walk in Lambton's footsteps and try to find signs of the despicable worm. I still think it's a pyramid, that's why. A journey so far east in England may not most obviously be for the purpose of experiencing the sights of ancient folklore, but one tale of the jewel of the countryside around there, an unmissable part of any time spent in the Tyne and Wear region. It's not really explaining anything again. It's, I mean, they give you this, you get a few words and you go, oh, and then you can't carry on because it just never really goes on. And then worms feel all the rage right now, as the latest tale we told, of course, too late for the inclusion in the first edition. Oh, I don't need to read that bit. Is the Laidley worm, a very original take on the dragon slaying plot, situated in nearby Bamborough Castle, but Lambton's slimy, frightening beast takes the biscuit when it comes to blood-curdling horror. Maybe this is why they had to wear their armour. Yes, even when reimagined by Ken Russell, the Lair of the White Worm, how now wouldn't you rather come to Halloween Tales of Britain than sit through that film again? See you there and bring some spare trousers. It's obviously not very happy then, the film.
Wow.
But there's a monument that looks Roman on top of the hill. I think that's a pyramid then, because they're saying that its tail wrapped round the hill, that's how you knew it was there, but then that's a pyramid, that's why.
And the fact that the National Trust is involved, there must be quite a reality to it. But yeah, I mean, what is a dragon before a dragon becomes a dragon? You'd think it'd be like in a lizard worm form, or...
Well, I don't know how to grow its wings. Although sometimes they show it with wings, but then sometimes they show griffins and sometimes they show dragons. So, you know, it just depends what they want to put in. And also, everybody that's fighting a dragon is a knight, you know, with a white cross on him. And you know, originally, I can't remember which person it is that actually slays the dragon.
Earlier, you never get any other human fighting a knight. It's always a knight and a dragon, or a knight versus another knight.
But it's not giving you... There's steps up there. I think they look like steps up the Tor. You've got steps. I'm sure I remember them steps like that. So up the Tor in Glastonbury. So...
I mean, the armours that we're talking about, they're always a different material to the ones that we see that the humans wear. You know what I'm saying? They're more like silvery...
There you go. It's got folklore destination, Glastonbury Tor. That's because this hill is like this, and that one's got a tower on the top, which Marie Wheatley says it was a church, but I don't think it was. I think it was just a tower. It was always a tower. Oh my! We found out more information, but we haven't really found in. Oh, there you go. The Lambton worm at Penshaw.
The answer to the worm. Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm saying. A lot of researchers have dug down the same tunnel.
And there's another one. There's the Lambton worm.
Yeah, I think I did some reading on that the other day, the Lambton worm. Didn't discover much about it, though.
But you know what it could be, don't you? They called it a worm or whatever, but it could have been a fighting body of people.
I'm not too sure on any of it, but there is more to it than meets the eye.
I wasn't sure the dragon part was real, and I was thinking that these were griffins.
Well, I mean...
Because what it is they give all these names for things, but, you know, like the griffin is technically, it's what the griffin means technically, and it's supposed to be supreme and stuff like that, bring you good luck and whatever it is. It's a whole thing with the griffin.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we know that...
And they call it the terrible tale, because basically all it was doing was eating the humans until someone slayed it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we know that the dragon is the griffin is the dragon, right? Both the same thing. But the Tartarian Empire had the flag of the griffin, if you like, and it was documented and it was worldwide. The maps tell you this. But then why wasn't the Roman Empire choreographed or categorized in the same manner as the Tartarian Empire? Yeah, when we know we've got Romano-Greco buildings everywhere in the world, as well as what we have Tartaria.
Yeah, and there's another person here. They look like they're dressed up as a monster. It says the legacy of the Lambton worm, and they look more like vampires again. I don't know. I don't know why they've lied.
Is it that the worm is the actual parasite that they put inside a human and it makes them vampirical? I don't know. I mean, why we had nearly more than 100 years worth of vampire films? You know, the reality of it.
The lady worm of Spindle, whatever that is. I'm not. Oh, yeah, the Spindle Leston Hugh. There's another one. So that's 3. It's bizarre.
It is quite bizarre, and then you think about.
Oh, so I press this one then. Let's have a look and see what this one's about. The one that's look a bit vampire-like. And don't forget, it's all now linked to the Danes, the Vikings.
Again.
I'm just opening this page up just to see what it says. It sometimes takes a little bit of time to open up. Come on, then it's coming. Come on, come on. Oh, the say this one's Dragon Ledge or Cryptic. The legendary of the Lambton worm.
You know, I watched the actual film about that, and it doesn't say much about the worm. It's exactly what you're talking about, but it doesn't mention the worm or the Lambton.
Yes, I just lost the picture. Come on.
That's very strange.
I've just lost my story. I don't want to go to Amazon. Oh, I just want to go back to that one. I hate that because it's all white. I don't want a book. Right, here we go. I was just looking at it. So, the wonderful legend of the Lambton worm talks about British dragons, 1980. Alfred, let's go on. I don't know. Story of the Lambton worm, registered Sunday, 1420, Easter Sunday. For the start of the story claims have been widely repeated since. But I mean, if one person says it was 3 inches long and the next person said it was 323 feet long to wrap its tail around the mountain, then we're never going to get anywhere, are we? Because it's too loose on the story.
It's like you're talking different ages where the worm had developed into a huge thing, which takes time.
Here we go. Worm Hill, tradition says, was once possessed by an enormous serpent that wound its horrible body around the base. That it destroyed much provision and used to infest the Lambton estate, till some hero in the family engaged in it seized in armour set with razors. Which is probably one of the reasons that the armour is so put out there, because they used it to slay the serpent. It's called a serpent here. That's different. That's a snake.
Yeah, this is what I've been saying. This is what I've been saying, that it is a serpent. And when you look at it in allegory, that the worm being inside the armour is like it's conquered that person. You know, it's taken it over.
Sounds very biblical, like, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, because it goes all the way through the ages. It comes right up to 500 years later, or even 800 years later, and it constantly makes its reappearance. So it's just like, this is what I'm saying, there's two factions fighting each other. The Roman Empire versus the Serpent Empire, which the Serpent Empire being the Dragon Empire or the Griffin Empire. Two different factions. And I think that's probably what's going on today, you know.
But you can see why it's a myth when when they explain it like that. But you know what? In the olden days, we had there was big creatures and big humans, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was. It's depicted on the maps of all the times.
you know, Goliath and all that in the Bible. Some of those are big beasts in there.
Well, yeah, you got the Olympians, then you got the Titans, you got the Tartarians, and the Goliaths.
Well, this is sort of saying the same sort of things again, and it's, you know, once they say myth, you know, like, oh, I don't know. Anyway, there's loads of history on it.
It's not so much myth anymore. I mean, you've got so many various people looking into the same area and finding the same results. And we know that evidence, you know, it needs no defence if the evidence is still here. And there's evidence in some of the buildings.
I think it's a bit weird that it looks like a Chinese or a Chinese dragon.
Well, to me, it sounds like the dragons weren't just in one area. That's for sure.
I mean, that sounds like the same thing. I mean, the Chinese have got this dragon.
Yeah, the same sort of thing. But it's worldwide.
This thing terrorised everybody until somebody eventually killed it. But when you look at the pictures, it's small. Then it's wrapped itself round a mountain. So it can't be 3 foot big and then wrap itself round a mountain.
No. Definitely not. Yeah, it's quite sinister. It is quite sinister, but it's these not armours from that certain period, I think over 300 years maybe, and they all look the same, you know, and then all of a sudden things change, you know, come to the 10th century, you start having normal armour for normal everyday humans, so it is sinister.
Well, do you know what you've done? You've just given me another piece of jigsaw puzzle now, because now we found out a bit about the Lambton worm, and that whatever it is relates to our history, but we're not sure in what context. Was it a worm? Was it a serpent? Was it a dragon? Or was it a griffin? But that one, the one they're showing quite often, looks more like the Chinese dragon. But and then there's a whole story whether it was to do with the Vikings, and they could have been going over Doggerland. It's all a bit crazy. There's more pieces to the puzzle now.
Well,
oh, do you know what they've got up in the background? I know they're giving a time and a period. There's a windmill in the dragon. There's a windmill. So it can't be that long ago. It can only be a few hundred years ago then, because it's got a windmill in it.
Yeah, I'd say 15, 16, 1700s, around about that period. But it's like you said about Doggerland, and you've just confirmed the fact that they came across from Holland right over to mid-Britain, exactly where the land used to be, or where it's shallow. Let's just say it's shallow and it's not so deep. And so, what happened to that land? This is what puzzles me. It's like it's dropped. You know, perhaps it did drop. Perhaps there was a quake and it dropped. But we know it's there. But this confirms what the theory about them going backwards and forwards with all the wars. That it was land that you could actually still cross.
And that's if they even had the wars, because we don't know if any of that's true, do we?
No, precisely.
So all we've done is put more questions in there. But it's very interesting to see it, because, you know, like, this is the myth of the dragon, isn't it? I mean, we don't believe in the dragon. I think it's griffins. But in England, that's the start of the myth of the dragons, then, isn't it?
Well, you got the Welsh dragon still on their flag. You know. So
I know, but they couldn't put the griffin on because it's a certain rule.
I think that's what it is. I mean, it's like their language. They were almost forced not to speak their own language.
Yeah, I'm just so shocked. Yeah, because they were all Gaelic. You had Welsh, Somerset. You had Scottish, Irish, and you had Brittany.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that I came across when I used to live in Scotland as a child, and the way they spoke in certain areas, the further north you went, and it sounded.
They don't really want people speaking the Gaelic languages. And I mean, like, for instance, Welsh is older than Latin, and they've got, like, could have loads of letters together without any A-E-I-O-U's.
Yeah.
So that's quite incredible. But I'm just so shocked, Christian, that this
without the vowels.
Serpent, snake, dragon, worm just looks like a Chinese dragon.
I mean, this is exactly what I'm say to quite a lot of people, that when I was at school, we got taught about these histories, but it wasn't a clear, in-depth history of why, reasoning, what caused it. It was just about wars and what happened and who won.
Yeah, it might be code word for something from the past. And this one, I'm not sure if they've got it in water or not, but, you know, don't they? Oh, I don't know. I don't think it's true. There's no way have they been finding, over time, great big dead snakes.
I mean, if you could put a worm inside a person that is like a controlling system, I mean, it's not that far different of what they're trying to do today with what they're doing, right?
There's always this bit of history with nowhere to take it to. There's nowhere to link it. There's loads of information, but there's not enough.
No, I'm connecting the dots from my end the way I connect them, and there is a connection with history, all right, with us and creation, Genesis. You take it whichever way you like it, but it's always the same story through history, that you have war, and you think yourself, we already know that through the 250 odd years that America has been created, there's been like 2 or 3 years that they haven't been at war with anybody, and you think, why is that? Why?
Well, we've been very peaceful. We've been very peaceful then for a while, because we've not been at war for, what is it, the 40s, that's 60s, 80 years.
Well, there have been wars. They've been proxy wars. When you look at Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, I mean, I could go on, and it's still going on. But the art of war is now being changed, because the amount of weaponry they've got at their arsenal, they could probably destroy this world 10 times over. But that wouldn't help whoever their masters are and why the world, to a certain degree, and what's going on with the rest of it. But the art of war has changed to silent weapons, and this is what's being used. Silent weapons, and the war's still going on. It's just a different format of it.
So I was just looking this one up. There's a painting for sale. Now it's looking more dragon-like, and it's got scales all over it. It's still got the knight on the horse and all the crisscrosses and everything. So it's based on the local legend. This work features with the Lambton worm with the Penshaw monument in the background and a knight on horse. But that's it, really. So that wasn't so helpful. I wish there was a bit more information. Like here, I just think that's because that's a pyramid with that's the steps covering up with a serpent.
There's definitely that the serpent is definitely a connection going right back to the days of creation. Whether it's a worm, a snake, or a serpent, it's the same scenario, the same logic, basically. The interference of it. I think that's the best way to put it. The interference of the serpent.
Do you believe in the serpent then? Oh, there it is. I've got a map of where it is. It's not that far from Sunderland. There's the hill with the thing on top. So it can't be the sea. And it's in, what's this bit with the dots round it? I wonder if, I don't know what that is. It's got dots round it. Ooh. Dots all around there. It must be a county or something. Oh, it's in Sunderland. Oh, okay. Let's meet the Penshaw Mount. Doesn't look very pyramid-like there, but...
Well, they say that evolution started with the Amorites, the things that the fossilized things that you still find here, there, and everywhere, the beginning of life. So it wasn't a worm that we start with, or a serpent, the origin of the species of everything. So where does the actual the worm come in? Through evolution.
Depends what the worm was, doesn't it? Like could have been like Napoleon.
Yeah, a mystery.
Well, it could have been.
It could have been.
Well, thanks for that. We don't know if it's a worm, a serpent, a griffin, or a snake.
Yeah.
Oh, that doesn't explain anything. The Lambton Worm, Volume 1. This is a series based on legends. So there's no point looking that one up because it's just a book.
I mean, in some of these armours...
Oh, there you go.
The arms were static. What's all that about? That you couldn't move the arms?
That's why I think that maybe they were for jousting.
It's definitely strange and weird. You know, it boggles the mind.
Should we because we can always come back to this in a week or something, and
or
even a few
some more research
and do a bit more research on it. I mean, I found out quite a lot today on the computer, but it doesn't explain enough. And what is it? A serpent, a snake, a dragon, or a griffin, or a worm?
But to me, I think it develops into something larger and longer.
Well, maybe they had to do that to lie and hide the history. And it's not that far from Hadrian's Wall either, which was the Pict people. I didn't know the Pict people built Hadrian's Wall.
Well, this is where the Tartarian Empire comes back into place, doesn't it? Was the wall built? We were told it was Romans that built the wall.
Well, they said basically it was put up because,
Hadrian.
The Romans couldn't beat them. The Pict. We're talking of the Pict people, who are highly, like, if we thought Maoris were traditional and all their dancing and tattoos, these people were absolutely covered in blue tattoos.
Yeah.
What have we got as our national? I mean, I know that's Scottish, so it'd be a bit different. But what have we got? Maypole dancing.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether you're...
Oh, that's it. It's St. George, isn't it? St. George slayed the dragon. I couldn't think of that name either. Sorry, so many things going through my brain. St. George slayed the dragon. That's what it kind of looks like. It almost looks like this is leading up to St. George slaying the dragon.
And St. George is the flag, right? The flag represents St. George.
Ah, so you think this is to do with the flag?
And the dragon is the griffin, right? So Griffin... or the dragon was the Tartarian Empire. So is it that the Brits ended the Tartarian Empire, the beginning of the end sort of thing?
Sort of, except she made the Commonwealth with all of it. Like, if you weren't directly aligning to her, then you're in the Commonwealth, so you're still aligned to her, and it's most of the world. Ooh,
yeah, and when you look at the Tartarian Empire, a lot of it is now, well, it's what you call the British Empire. It became the British Empire.
I did say, didn't I, the Indian one? Oh, I've got hiccups now. And it said that it was the biggest corporation, the East India Company, the biggest corporation, had its own army, its own territories. Yeah, and one of those would have been America.
Yeah, exactly.
There's got to be more then, hasn't there? There's got to be more corporation countries, and this is how they were doing it. Then they brought the maritime law in to cover everything up.
Yeah, which is the Phoenicians.
Oh, it gets so complicated, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but at least we're trying to get to the bottom of it. You know, trying to establish a truer history than what we've been told.
I've got one of those in my garden. It's got the Lambton worm and it's got a stone sink. In my old house, they had a stone sink and then they had a china sink. And obviously they were outdated because we were into plastic sinks then, whereas we're now into stainless steel sinks. But there's a stone sink. I've got one just like that in the garden, which has got plants in it. But that used to be an old sink in a house. So at the same time my sink was made, all this was going on. Oh, dearie me. It's funny, isn't it?
And I think I've come across, in America, in one of the carvings on the statues of a certain building, I can't remember which building it was, it's even got that same worm attached to the carvings.
Well, maybe the worm is a signal. It's nothing to do with killing anybody. It's to do with the Danish.
It's definitely mysterious.
Do you see what I mean? Once you stick a worm on there, you're changing it. If the worm is more associated with the there's that thing again. If the worm's more associated with the Danish, then maybe that's what it's about. It's the twist of the Danes in the armour.
Yeah.
That could be it. The Lambton Worm, an English legend by Joseph Jacobs. So
we're not even interpreting the worm as a chrysalis. The worm could be chrysalis of what it is to become. Yeah. If the worm is inside the armour, right? I'm talking about the Roman armour or the Roman armour plating. If the worm's inside the armour plating.
Do you know what they're referring this to? Another person has referred this back to Bram Stoker's novel, The Lair of the White Worm. So they're saying it's very like that. And the Ian Watson's novel, The Fireworm.
Wow.
Thing is, when you get this, you think, now you need to look through 25, 30 posts on here and now read 2 books. And you still might not find any information.
Exactly.
That's what it's like.
Yeah. You got to remember, a worm is also a chrysalis, and a chrysalis or a caterpillar becomes, well, it's not a caterpillar, but it becomes something else. So I'm just trying to focus on that point. Like you said, that the worm became a snake, or it encompassed the whole pyramid.
Here we go. Look at this, right? So this is one says a little bit different. It says it sucked cow's milk, devoured the lambs, worried the cattle, frightened all the women and the girls. But anyway, and then the terrible visitation brought young Lambton of Lambton Hall to his senses. He took upon himself the vows of the cross and departed for the Holy Land. That's like the Knight Templars, because it's got the crisscrosses on it, and that's all to do with war. So
again,
yeah.
Yeah, well, when you look at the Knights Templar, right through their ages, they ransacked, and they were supposed to be protectors and to guard the pilgrims from land to land, but it didn't work out that way, accordingly, because they were supposed to have been decimated at a certain time, what was it, 1600s, 1700s, but they re-evolved as the later life as the Jesuits, so
He's got the same picture.
Scenario. More questions.
Yeah. So basically, it's not right. The worm drew nearer till it was at last. It came to the top of the turf. Came up to the turf. But when it sniffed the milk, it turned aside the trough and swallowed all the milk, and then slowly turned round across the river, called its bulk 3 times, and then the worm hill for the night.
I wonder if the worm is something.
It's a military thing, isn't it? It's a military thing, probably.
Yeah, I think it's a military thing, and only the enlightened that know what the worm represents. You know, if the worm.
If we ever hear someone go, you know about the worm, or the worm, or in the middle of a sentence they go worm such and such, we go, there you go, it's all part of code words.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I'm saying. If the worm is actually a depiction of an illustration, but it's coded. You know, it might be just in code. And
there's quite a lot of books and information about it, but it's all going to tell you it's myth and nobody will believe it.
No, and then when you consider that, I don't know whether you've posted it yourself about, I don't know whether it was World War I or World War II, where you posted a robotic soldier that was visiting.
Oh, I did that. Yeah, that was me.
Based on the same, is that based on the same principle of the knight's armour and becoming alive and
not just that, they had these machines that they could sort of put their bodies and heads in, and then they could push them across the ground so that their heads and their body down to their back was protected. And I thought, well, I've never seen them before either.
No,
they don't look in place. And I was thinking, what about the rough ground? It'd be horrible travelling with one of those. You know, you hit a brick, you have to go forward.
Yeah, but the armour.
Oh, hang on, there's something here. The early Egyptians worshipped a holy crocodile, the Messiah. Over the years, this became a dragon, which in turn became the sign of kingship. The Eastern idea of a dragon influenced the Celtic tribes who invaded Britain, and the Celtic kings in Britain were known as pent dragons. Oh my God, that's for a film, isn't it? Pendragons.
Arthur Pendragon.
Yeah. Heroes in Roman and Greek mythology fought with dragons, but don't forget, whenever they talk about the Romans, they're just failing to say they might be talking about the Second Reich or the Third Reich, but they're not telling us. So even though it's the Holy Roman Emperor, the first one was the Italian, the second one was the German, and the third one was the German, and that finished at the time of the Second World War. So that also finished with Tartaria. Anyway,
Wow.
let me just so it goes. The heroes in the Roman and Greek mythology fought with dragons. The Greek would darken the word drakon. Oh, Drakon sounds like Dracula now, doesn't it? Meant one who sees...
Dracos. The Dracos.
The one who sees or sharpened one, sighted one, and at first was a large serpent as well as a dragon. How could he be a serpent and a dragon? The ancient Norsemen carved dragons on their ships. So there you go, that's back to the Danish. And dragons were drawn in the shields of the Anglo-Saxon tribes. The Chinese people also had a dragon mythology. Yeah, I'm glad that someone put that together. In China, the dragon was seen as a symbol of good fortune. In the West, however, dragons are not usually seen to be friendly. English dragons were often known as worms. There you go. So it was a dragon. There you go. It says, however, dragons are not usually seen as friendly. English dragons were known as the worms. I don't understand that. Why you call a dragon a worm? It's a dragon. With long scaly bodies, short legs, or no legs at all, and often no wings. They were slimy and killed with poisonous breath rather than fire. Worm is dragon. Worm is dragon in Old English.
At least a woman going about getting near it, you died. So
because the smell of it, it'd go, with its breath, and you go, that's it, I'm dying.
Yeah.
But isn't that weird? It says worm is dragon in Old English. So we need to look up what the Old English was to see whether dragon is worm. Almost every place in the world has dragon tales. They go back to very early writings, which may explain why dragons came in many shapes and sizes. But I still think it's not. It's what is it? They're griffins. They're not even dragons, they're griffins. Anyway, today, dragons are usually known as very large reptile-like creatures with 2 bat-like wings, 4 legs, a long neck and a tail. They breathe fire, hoard treasure, and are often green. However, in the past, there was a lot of different dragons. Some look like snakes. And don't forget, if they're using these, basically, so it's all to do with symbology, isn't it? Looks like snakes. Some look like lizards. Some had 2 legs. Some had 4 legs. Some had wings. Others did not, but could still fly. There are many tales of brave Christians who killed dragons. In the Bible, dragons represent evil and the devil. The dragon became thought of mean by bloodthirsty, an enemy to the beaten in battle as Christianity spread. Join us, the Christians! Kill the dragon! In the early days, the Christian church used heroic tales of saints and dragon slayers to illustrate how good could conquer the evil. In the story, John Lambton returns from the Crusades, so he would be following in a long tradition of Christian dragon slayers. Is that what the Crusades were about? We need to go and kill the dragons.
It could possibly have been about that. He said it was the free lands, the free lands.
Hey, England, Mercia, come and help us. We need to slay the dragon. Don't forget to put your armour on where you can't see, you can't breathe, and you can't turn round.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's all bananas, isn't it? In these days, I mean, when you actually think about it logically, I hope people can think about it logically and realise it's all ridiculous. In these early times, dragons were thought to be real. I mean, talk about whales and dragons. I mean, they don't talk about... I've never heard this place talked about before, but there's loads of bits and pieces on it. They were seen as responsible things as rough worms, whirlwinds, and other natural events people could not explain. Seeing lots of dragons predicted a huge disaster, such as the sighting of 795 AD, fearful flighting and dragon blazing in the dreadful manner were seen to fly through the air, signs which foreshadowed a mighty famine. Do you know what? It just seems incredible to think, oh, look, I could go, Christian, a dragon just flew past. I don't know, it doesn't sound right. The Lambton worm has long been part of the folklore in Durham. Exactly how the story became attached to John Lambton is unclear. Some versions mention the devastation caused by the worm in the local area, so maybe there was some local catastrophic that the members of Lambton family helped to put right, and over time this became the worm. However, the story has elements in common with many other legends. It is essentially a tale of good versus evil. In the story, the young man's problems came from the fact that he ignored the advice of his elders and went fishing on a Sunday, and even worse, he cursed the river. The young man only defeats the worm when he turns his back on his rebellious ways and joins the Crusades. Why is he joining the Crusades? He just went fishing. Do you see what I mean? It just goes from one extreme to the other, so you can't put it all together.
And I remember watching the film, but yet the worm was never mentioned, which I find really astonishing.
Can you imagine what putting the film out? The worm. Oh. At the time of the story was set, Middle Ages, the church was a very powerful establishment. Most people attended services, and Sunday was a day reserved for parish praising God. Therefore, the myth provides a warning against ignoring the teachings and importance of the church. This aspect of the story may have been emphasised again during the Puritan era as a means of showing the dangers of not taking the church seriously. So we've got another era now, the Puritan era. However, this story has another element to it, the curse, and it could also have developed in part to explain why so many of the Lambtons died in unusual situations. And then it goes on and on. I don't know. It's not really, I don't know.
It's very, it's mystifying, isn't it? That the way they've left it all, it makes the mind more inquisitive, because we don't understand the allegory, the symbology, or the numerology.
I don't think it's a real thing. I think it's symbology.
You know, and it's hard to decipher, because you don't really know where to start.
No.
But when you go back to the times of Osiris and the way Osiris was decapitated and, or should I say, a bit like William Wallace, thrown to the four winds, but yet he was put back together and he was okay. And this is where the phallic symbol comes into place, I think. Ever since them days, you know, with the obelisk and the Egyptians, you know, when you think about it, it's just a straight up standing obelisk. There's a connection with that as well as the worm, I think.
Well, we've gone a long way from the beginning. We started off on armour and how could they be wearing it? How could they see? How could they breathe? What did they put in it? Was it a worm?
Impossible.
And the worm ends up being a dragon, and it all links to the Vikings.
Yeah. And the Vikings went worldwide, didn't they? As we know now.
Yeah, they even went to America.
Yeah. It's very strange.
And now the dragon, like, 1 minute it's like a grisly, horrible monster, and the next thing it looks like a Chinese dragon. Like, I'm a bit whoa on that, because why would they link it to the Chinese dragon? Is all this stuff true after all? Like, you'd be looking, hey Mum, 6 dragons just, or worms, or whatever you want to call them, have just flown past. I mean, was it a bit like that? You only hear it in the myths, not the stories, if you understand what I mean. It's not in the history, it's only in the stories, the myths.
Yeah, I mean, the dragon's used in history in various ways, isn't it? And the Chinese still adhere to the dragon. It's like they appraise it, they don't demolish it, you know.
Yeah, because they've got a different story about it, haven't they? But, you know, they can't even tell us the truth that it was a griffin, not a dragon, and there's no such things as dragons.
No.
But that thing doesn't half look a bit like the Loch Ness Monster as well?
Exactly like it. You know, when you see pictures of the Loch Ness Monster, it's more like a worm, isn't it? Or like a dragon. you know, the footages they released of it when it has
Yeah, because don't forget, we're looking at dragons breathing fire with wings. They didn't all have wings, and there was different ones. I just think it's incredible. But in the old language, a worm was a dragon. Why not just keep it as a dragon then?
I think it's to do with the paintings and the illustrations that have been left behind. It's the allegory of it being a conquest and a defeat. I think that's what it is. That's just a short answer, but I might
Should we do
wrong.
a bit more research and come back to this? I think that, we should try and do a bit more research, or just bring it up when we have another hangout.
Yeah, I think that's probably best.
Because I'm a bit head donked now, because it's a bit strange, isn't it? Because it's a bit like, oh no, it's a worm. Oh no, it's a dragon. Oh no, actually the dragons were griffins. Oh no, it's a snake. It's a bit much, and there's all these folk stories, but we know the folk stories are often real. So what does that mean? There was dragons flying around. It's all a bit strange. Anyway, should we finish? Because there's not much more we can say. We've undug loads of stuff.
Okie doke.
Anyway, thanks for another piece of the puzzle, Christian.
No worries.
Anyway, I'm just gonna turn the recording off, and we'll say goodbye afterwards. But thank you very much for helping me do the dragon. What should I call? I'm going to have to call it the dragon, the serpent.
Dragon worm.
Dragon worm.
Dragon worm.
Dragon worm.
Or baby dragon.
No, I'm going to call it the dragon worm of England.
yeah, that's probably more appropriate, the dragon worm of England.
Yeah, the bind of our life at this rate. Sorry we can't work it all out, but it's quite fascinating. But it's just another piece of the puzzle, which we always get pieces of the puzzle. You get a bit of information and there's still nowhere to go. Oh yeah, and the 25,000 different versions of it.
Exactly.
Anyway, Christian, like I said, thank you for that, and chat room.
Bye-bye.